So welcome back to round 7 with Inigo
Welcome.
and Jörg. And now I was playing against twinlesstwin. And twinlesstwin is a very known player on MTGO. And he recently played more likely Delver and Jeskai decks. So I think I played against him already on other archetypes like Doomsday for a while, but that was a while ago. But here I was pretty sure that I was playing against Jeskai Control. So here I also win the die roll. Being on the play is always a good thing to have. And here, when I see that hand now, I think it was a very risky hand because only one land.
Yeah,
And a couple of times I play against control decks where I just have the only one land and I don't be able to put pressure on the board, and if they just remove one creature, then I can't really put pressure on the board. And if they resolve a 3-mana planeswalker, then don't come back to the game. But here, strangely, I decided to keep this hand, but probably now I wouldn't have done that anymore. But here I trusted that I will find a way to get an additional land. And also this hand enables very fast pressure on the board because of the heritage druid. So here, um, yeah, I randomly clicked on an elf, I assume. So I didn't want to play the heritage druid into it because I was too
mana
reliant
is
on it.
mana is right now a priority. Yeah,
Exactly. So here I decided to start with a reclaimer. If he doesn't answer it, it still has a use, and I can maybe somehow use activation in the next turns.
yeah. It plays for the best top deck possibility. If we top deck a land, we can activate turn 2.
Yeah,
Okay, so
and
top deck
they
land is
answered.
just perfect. What we needed.
Yeah, they answered the reclaimer as expected, and with the 21 lands, seems to be a solid count, and in this event it worked very well when I needed to top deck the lands. So could be otherwise, but here I have the land, and then I can play good Magic, I would say, because
Yeah,
then
I think on that regard, I accept the percentage that we get of loading in some games if that means we make land drops more consistently because as you mentioned, not drawing the second land in this game would mean not being in the game, being out of the game almost instantly. So I think the floating percentage is less relevant than the ability to play Magic. I always want to play Magic.
yeah, I see the world where the game wouldn't be ended immediately if I didn't find the land here, but then I
Just too
can
slow.
only play, let's say, the Shepherd first, and then I need to top deck the land, and then I can just cast the Elvish Visionary, and I'm a bit too much behind on mana. But then, if I found the second land, I think, especially with this hand, there would be a very good chance to recover because I am able to finish the opponent with the natural order. And if he somehow taps out in the mid game, there is a way to resolve the natural order. But for sure, everything I needed was a land here. So here
Yeah.
they only played fetch land, and here, okay, that's interesting sequencing. So wasn't really sure which card to play first, but Heritage, in my opinion, would have still an important role here in this situation because I needed the mana. I missed the land drop already, so should have led with the Shepherd, especially as I have two already. And this also prevents the opponent by using any of the counter spells. If they opted to counter this Heritage Druid would be fine for me in general, but in this situation I would prefer, I would say, more mana. But on the other hand, I could have also just played the Visionary here and tried to assemble a slow game with card drawing, so I don't think there is a world where he counters the Heritage Druid here. But then, when they realized that I played the third elf,
The third elf, yeah.
they tried to respond and
But
tried
it's
to
a
find.
but whoops, it's a shepherd.
Yeah, and especially with the Heritage Druid, it produces also mana, and he can't interact with me here at all. So then it's very easy to just play the Symbiote and draw a bunch of cards. Here I don't find the land, but it's not that very bad for me because I have 4 creatures in play now. They don't have the way to prevent anything of that. And here I don't see any card which really can matter at this point, which is playable in the main deck. So
I think something relevant here to mention is the sequence in there, leading first with with symbiote, because when you're going to play the Visio, then they will be probably afraid uh, of the BFF combo, right?
yeah,
So because we have double symbiote, I think I like that.
yeah, but in this case I wouldn't be able to cast any more, or I couldn't use the mana boost. So I had to hope that this is the only removal spell he has. And I think there is a decent chance that they have only one removal spell in the hand and a 3 mana planeswalker, and usually a protection like Force of Will or Force of Negation. So I think um, the impact is much higher if I try to resolve 3 elves and produce the amount of mana. But that would be different if I had additional mana sources in my hand. Then for sure, starting with the symbiote makes sense. Then they can try to break the combo and Swords to Plowshare the Visionary, for example. But I wanted to create the additional mana with these elves here,
Yeah.
and then drawing more
Um,
lands, drawing
one
cards.
question here: how present is Supreme Verdict right now in your mind when you're playing when you're seeing this board? Are you worried? Are you thinking, okay, maybe I want to stop playing my creatures now?
No,
What are
because
you thinking right now?
no, because I in this situation I already have to kill. So um, there is a good chance because here I can just play the Shepherd next turn. Depends on what he does here. If he has the fairy and bounces the creature, for example, then it's a bit different. Then I need to hope to draw a Cradle or another land. But here in this board state, if they let me untap, then I can just play the second Shepherd, then sacrifice an elf and untap the other elf with the visionary, with the firewood symbiote. So I don't think that it comes to a point where um, Supreme Verdict matters, and it's also game one. So yeah, usually they have access to the card, but I would say that they are probably getting more access to the card in the post-board games as they only already know which deck I play. Okay, they can just expect that I'm playing S in the challenges also. Yeah, but depending on what they are doing now, then in the next turn I would have different options, I would say. So I would have also got the option, for example, to try to get a Christ with a natural order. This isn't the best way to use the natural order, but with my board state I'm so ahead already, and then I can diversify the threats they need to answer. So
Yeah,
I
so
wouldn't,
Supreme
I
Benedict
wouldn't
doesn't answer or your board at once. I agree with
exactly.
that.
So I wouldn't definitely wouldn't have played all my creatures out here just to play into the sweeper. That's for sure. But in this case, the sweeper didn't matter at all because here they only had Dinar set and didn't even use it because it then survived here. So they probably even had the Supreme Verdict. Could be possible. So that would be definitely would be a reason to keep this hand, because he had the first removal spell for the first creature, then cantrips, probably also the Nasset, and probably the Verdict to just finish after the Nasset. But yeah, I was on the play, and he wasn't able to disrupt the mana development here. And if he was able to disrupt the mana producing, then probably his plan would have worked. Then he can assemble the Narset and the next turn the Supreme Verdict. Probably I don't even be able to answer the Narset then. And then if he verdicts, I have to rebuild. And he is also probably creating a card advantage with the Narset. But yeah, very important that they weren't able to disrupt my mana development here. And now I found the additional land, so I think I just played the Shepherd as already said before. And then I can produce the 4 mana, sacrifice. Ah no, okay, that's also a possibility because I had the mana, additional mana available. And then I can just untap one elf here, and then it's enough damage with the Crater Hoof, just ignoring the Nazet. But also Progenitus and Grist would have been reasonable choices here.
Yeah,
Depending.
but as they were full tapped out, I think the choice for going with Hoof was pretty safe.
Yeah, and when they just, if they just answered one or two creatures here before, then would be different. Then I could have needed to have a different route. But let's say they just answered the Wirewood and the Shepherd, then I would still be able to resolve the Nature Order this turn. But then it wasn't lethal with the Crater Hoof anymore, so then I needed to take a different route. And then I probably needed to get Grist, and with Grist I could have answered the Narset also, so then they couldn't create card advantage or play Days Undoing or Supreme Verdict to set me back into the Stone Age. So yeah, but for sure it was very risky to keep that hand, and in retrospect I wouldn't have done it anymore. So very lucky to find the second land right away. But the increased land count also helps with that. Any additional notes to this
No,
game?
not really. I think, if anything, I also acknowledge again the power of Progenitus. If they would have found maybe one or two removals, we probably would still have access to make 4 mana and try to resolve one super early natural order. These games usually go long, especially game one when we don't have the access to Progenitus. So yeah, you're making me consider maybe trying it again in the main deck.
Yeah, you just have so many options with that. So you just decide which target you get against the control players and which situation. So there are a lot of situations where you aren't able to kill with the Crater Hoof, and then you just play the Progenitus because it's too or very hard to handle with, and it's also a very fast clock. And in a lot of other situations, you just get the Grist because there is a good chance that they have probably a sweeper in the hand, and your board is already very good. So then having the Grist can help you to survive the upcoming sweeper. And in this board state, the Grist would also be very good because you were able to destroy the Narset.
Yeah, that is
And
a good point. I actually didn't consider, but the fact that that aspect of diversifying your threats, so not all your threats again, sorry, are answered by the same card, I think is very important and very smart also to do. So I
yeah,
will keep that in mind going forward in my games.
yeah, and is if you want to tell it like that, it's like an additional win condition. So we talked about the D&T matchup earlier, where we wanted to diversify the amount of win conditions we have our deck. So on the one hand, Glimpse of Nature with the multiple card draws win condition against them. then the resolving of the natural order, and the Elder Shepherd. So yeah, okay. From one hand, it's also the same win condition like the Behemoth with the natural order, but we can also hardcast the Behemoth sometimes. And the Progenitus is an additional win condition because you only need 4 mana and 2 turns to win the game. If you saw, and then I think the advantage is too strong. So, but depends on the meta game. So maybe in 3 months, I would say the metagame can shift dramatically, and then it doesn't really make sense to play the Progenitus anymore. And then probably maybe we need the Archon of Valor's Reach back, or even playing multiple of the Greater Hooves if we don't want to be reliant on the white mana source or so. But I think, yeah, elves will be changing a lot in the next months, and at the moment, I would still say that Progenitus helps very much, and it happens that you draw it, but more often than not, you don't draw it, and then having access to is okay for me.
It will be very problematic if it's a 1 card in 60 deck and you draw it more often than not. Definitely.
Yeah, it can also be that you just have it depends also on how much matches you are doing. So if you just play a league, slam a league with this list, and in each game you have it in your opening hand or draw it uh, within the game, that can happen in a league. But what's the sample size of one league with 5 matches, or let's say like up to 15 games? That's almost nothing. So I would say that if you go over a big sample size, like a couple of 100 games or 100 matches, for example, or 50, even 50, it's almost enough. And then you will see that it happens once or twice, but on the other hand, you get a lot of wins by that. So I think that's okay, and we can live with it.
Yeah.
So we go to game 2.
Sure.
So I can also show the sideboarding.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this part because I have thoughts on it, definitely. Okay, so as mentioned, you keep 1 heritage, you keep 1 endurance. I'm also surprised about that.
Yeah, the
Uh,
endurance, the endurance. So I wanted to have an option to get some. Maybe it looks like a bit random. So, but as I explained earlier in an earlier video of the last challenges, I like to trim the amount of heritage druids, and also want to cut 1 glimpse because, as we already told
while
about,
we
we
discussed,
want
yeah.
to have them stranded in our hand if they have the Narset or Hull Breacher. But with the endurance, I thought about it could be very good to have access to cards to just target ourselves, to just get back the cards in our deck. Especially, okay, that's also a corner case and it can happen, but if you have Christ and then you're milling, maybe your creative behemoth, for example, or your Christ get destroyed or countered, and then with the endurance you're able to get the cards back into your deck. But more likely, I would say it happens more often that, for example, the 2 Dried Arbors are destroyed, or most of the times exiled, but they can also be destroyed by the Supreme Verdicts or the Kozilek's Return. And then you have the possibility to get them back into your deck. And I think that's a very good thing to have access to, especially with the Reclaimers. Then you are able to get access to the Triad Arbors in the late game. And this can really help you to cast and resolve the Creative Behemoth, the hardcast one. So, yeah,
Yeah,
not really
I have
necessary. And in some situations, you can just flash in a creature, especially with the Planeswalkers. So it attacks Narset very well and also can attack Teferi. So I think the one access to the one card has advantages here, but it's not really necessary.
I regarding the graveyard, I think it's very interesting. It came up again for me in the last challenge where I was missing an effect to regrowth my graveyard into my library. So I can definitely see that one of endurance. And another card I usually like to have is Bojuka Bog, because usually these decks have uh, either Snapcasters or some Red Splash for Expressive Iteration and Mystic Sanctuary combo. So I do like to have a way to interact with that card advantage engine, if possible.
Yeah, that's so totally reasonable, and it depends a bit on the amount of graveyard cards I expect from the opponent. So most likely cards like Snapcaster Mage and Eternal Dragon. So if both of the cards or one of the cards is in the list in high numbers, I really like to have multiple of graveyard cards. But in this case, I probably didn't see that much of it in the opponent's deck list. So, and then I saw, or in the last deck list, sorry. And then I thought that having access to the one endurance can help in some situations because we can play at instant speed at the end of the turn without playing too much into the sweeper. We can interact with the planeswalkers. We can interact with their graveyard, can rebuy our cards. So much advantages. And but I don't think that we need more than one. So having four of them is a bit too much from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely the 3 power of endurance not it's worth considering. Very very strong into removing planeswalkers. So I could definitely get behind one of endurance.
Okay, so the first hand didn't have an initial mana source, so obviously a mulligan. And here, yeah, okay, that's not a perfect hand, but I think it has play and we are on the draw, so we are likely to find a land. So here, which card would you bottom uh, on this hand?
Probably endurance, because if it's the highest CMC.
Yeah, so we have two options here in my opinion. It's either the glimpse and the endurance because of the amount of less mana we have in this situation at least. It's not that likely that we cast it early. Um, so here I think I kept that and I put the glimpse. Indeed, I put the glimpse on the bottom.
Interesting.
So I thought that yeah, I need to play a couple of creatures first here to get some presence on the board and also maybe to plan ahead if it goes wrong and I don't find the land that early. So then the glimpse is totally useless. And with the endurance, I at least have the option to either play it if I have a couple of elves here, and I can interact with the opponent's graveyard. So not really sure if that's perfect, but probably could be able to just keep the glimpse and bottom the endurance, and having access to the card later makes more sense. But here immediately was successful again, finding the second land, but not a black mana source. It was a bit unfortunate, but
We
what could
still
I
have
say?
Birch Lord to fix, so it's probably not a problem. Also, turn one, yeah, that ending is going to hurt.
So the idea was, usually we can say that Bachelor is weaker in the matchup than the Reclaimer, but also again the Reclaimer has some bigger upside if I untap with
Definitely.
it. And also I wanted to keep here the black mana, so it was faster for me in my opinion. So um, yeah, but I can assume that the opponent has at least one removal spell. So here drawing the second Boseiju isn't that good for me. but
I'm going
yeah,
to mention that I think Birchlord is one of the best. I think no, it's the best creature after Symbiote to play around removal because it allows us to make so many plays turn two. I think I never ever play Birchlord turn one. If I have another play, uh, Birchlord is best to be played after turn two for onward.
yeah.
I think
And it can also play it as morph. For example, if you don't really know what you're playing against and suddenly there is a chalice on the battlefield, you can still cast it on turn 2 and have mana if they don't have the chalice. But if they have the
exactly.
chalice, you can still cast it for 3 mana, and also against Moonstone Bee it works very well because has colorless mana. But the Virtual Rangers are also a very good reason why I should have kept the Glimpse of Nature. So with this combination, there would have been a decent chance to draw a couple of cards, but uh, yeah, having an additional threat here isn't that bad, I would say. So um, yeah, not really sure what I was thinking there, but there are different options, and different options leading to different or sometimes the same results. So here, very interesting when I played the Thoughtseize. So they had a bunch of cantrips, and here the Snapcaster and the Swords. So I think that's their value card, so they can get value out of. On the other hand, I have Endurance in my hand, but I'm not really capable of casting it in this turn at least. And I didn't want to, if they top decking, for example, like a land, then they can Swords to Plowshares and Snapcaster Swords to Plowshares, for example. And I can't really prevent that because I don't want to evoke the Endurance. So here I
Oops.
was a bit too fast, but here I decided to play the Virtual Rangers and not the second Thoughtseize.
Thoughtseize.
And I wanted to get the Narset low on the loyalty counters, so it's not that good for them to get value out of the card. So
Makes sense.
um,
I think the hardest part in this matchup probably is to balance the amount of creatures you have in hand, like the pressure and what you're keeping in your hand. Because if you don't put enough creatures on board, Narset can threaten a day's undoing or enough activations that they can get the answers. And if you put too much on the board, then you can get wiped out by a Supreme Verdict. So I think the balance is the hardest to
yeah,
achieve.
yeah, and sometimes we just need to play into their sweepers. So sometimes they just get there 2 or 3 for 1. So we should plan with that ahead, and sometimes we can create a rebuild after that, especially if we also have the Wirewood Simian and the Visionary, for example. And then if they get 3 creatures off our board, and the next turn we are rebuilding with the Visionary, then I would say it's okay. And oftentimes we just lose too much on tempo or are not aggressive enough if we are playing too much also around cards like Kozilek's Return or so. So this happened in the last challenge when I was played against Jeskai, and I
But
tried
if
to
I'm not
play.
mistaken, Kozilek's Return is it's usually to be expected game post board, right?
It's a post board. Usually it's a sideboard card. That's true. Yeah. So here we are in a game 2, but usually it depends on if it's pre-board or post-board because the amount of sweepers increase after sideboarding and the amount of removal in general, I would say. So if the opponent knows exactly which deck you're on, then they are much more likely to have more of the answer cards. But yeah, okay. In the meanwhile, they should know that we are playing elves, so if they have 2 removal spells in their hand against elves, I think they keep it anyway, and they don't need to dig for a Force of Will or so. Okay, let's check out what happened next. So they pondered and
Pondering to brainstorm.
shuffled. They pondered and shuffled, then brainstormed, playing another land. And here in this situation, they faked, or they wanted to remove, but they wanted to get more value out of their Supreme Verdict, I guess. So
Yeah, makes
here,
sense.
in this situation, it's very good for me because I have 2 ways to attack. So here I have the Endurance, which I can play end of turn. So if they play a Planeswalker or just wipe the board, I can resume with the Endurance and the Visionary. And I also have the Thoughtseize to get away of the Supreme Verdict later if they keep it on their hand. And here I decide to just attack for 2 and not playing more creatures into the board, but also not using the Thoughtseize. So then they decided
Yeah,
to,
makes sense. So you can have access to the 3 mana to play the Endurance and recover from a possible board wipe.
yeah, and also very important here because I didn't want it to waste the Boseiju, and that could have been mattered if I drop decked the Natural Order, for example, and then I could have also played the Natural Order and got Progenitus or Grist in this case, where the Supreme Verdict in his hand. And here, now, they fetched, then they played Teferi, and then I decided to play the Endurance onto the board. So they could have just easily bounced it, doesn't really matter, but then it delays for me, and it's totally okay for me if they just still bounce it. And I can play it in the next turn again. So here they probably hoped to find a removal. That's why they bounced the Birchlaw Rangers, or maybe they just thought that they don't give me more value by bouncing the Endurance.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. Actually, bouncing the Birch Lore is best for us because it enables the best potential turns. But maybe it's also
Ah,
because they want to plow. Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's because they
yeah,
want to plow the 3
he
4.
he had another plow. Okay, then it makes sense. But you're right, especially the Birch Law also helps a lot if we had a Eclipse of Nature in our hand. So don't really understand why he's so he's not that mana efficient. But here, uh, yeah, I can just play the Visionary and then the Birch Lore again, and then it's probably the time where I use the Thoughtseize.
I thought is, yeah, I agree. We want to protect ourselves from a possible term Supreme Verdict. Exactly. That's exactly what happens.
Yeah. And then I knew about the Spell Pierce, but it was irrelevant because
Spell Pierce, it's very spicy, I would say. In 2022, playing Spell Pierce.
yeah, could have also been a Storm, but yeah, okay, with the Spell Pierce you cover a couple of cards, I would say, which don't can be used with the Storm. Not really sure if it's correct to do that, but yeah, you're right. So you don't see the card that often anymore, but he will have his reasons to not play the Storm instead. So here I have to be a bit aware because they play Mystic Sanctuary, and if I play too much power on the board, they can just rebuy it. So I can't really play the 3rd creature into that. It's not that good for me as a... here exactly what you're seeing now. They just brainstormed and then they used the Mystic Sanctuary, got the Supreme Verdict back, and yeah, my board position isn't that good in this situation, but playing the 3rd creature into the Supreme Verdict is like losing immediately. And with this combination, I have also more live draws like Glimpse of Nature, for example. So here he's just
Wow.
playing the waiting game, and now I have the way to play around the Spell Pierce.
Spell Pierce, yeah.
So I can just use my else here.
They do have 5 mana up, though.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. that was also for me. I thought about, okay, what is the reason why they not played the Supreme Verdict now? They could have just used the spell pierce and pitching, so it doesn't really mattering that much. So we could have countered the nature order anyway, but he has 5 mana up, and could be that he wanted to get more value out of Supreme Verdict. And another card I had on my radar was like, I'm not really sure about things like Containment Priest or Force of Negation, but yeah, I smelled a counterspell here, but I think the upside is too high to not play it. So
You have to go for it, even if
yeah,
it's a trade of resources, definitely.
yeah, and I
Not
see,
exactly.
and I
Exact
can
happens that
still,
exactly. Yeah.
I can also still top deck another one. Now it's unfortunate because the next draw was the third Thoughtseize then, so if I waited a turn, I could have prevent that. But here on the last turn, I should probably, not really sure if I should play the Virtual Rangers into the Supreme Verdict, but probably not because, as already explained, drawing the Glimpse of Nature would have been very good. So I think the waiting game here was
It's very
very
hard to
interesting.
make all, because I think all these calls are done with minimal information from both sides. So I think here the how to say, the instinct of the player is very important. For example, you have a very good instinct here not to play the Birchlore and play the Thoughtseize this turn. So I think it's very, that's a just another skill to develop as a player, your instinct in certain board states.
Yeah. And another card I had on my radar when they didn't play anything here was Shark Typhoon. Could also be an option, and that was the reason why I wanted to. Either it was like a Force of Will or a Shark Typhoon. That was the reason why they didn't play the Verdict. And on the other hand, they probably would have liked to get more value out of it. But here I could discard the Verdict again and then play the Virtual Ranger as a 2-2. And the opponent has the Day's Undoing. Oh no, I didn't even play it as a 2-2. So here he has the Day's Undoing. And now I find the fourth Thoughtseize.
Oh my god.
Not really sure if I decided to go for the day. Okay, here now I went for the Day's Undoing.
Yeah,
So
at this point we really want a shuffle for ourselves also. I think. I think I would have taken the swords here. Hmm.
yeah, not really sure because yeah, okay, the turn ends then. You're right. So 7 fresh cards would have been okay
But
for
also,
us.
nah, but probably you
But
are
I
right. The
but
risk
I have
of them top decking an Arset is also there. It's a
yeah
possibility.
yeah. Exactly. So you're right. He has 6 mana again, and if he top decks an asset, then I have a really
I
good
just
time.
have found that sometimes the control players, when they feel they are pressured enough, when you put enough pressure in them, they will go for the symmetric days undoing, even if they don't have the Narset, just to try to find something relevant. So it's not
But
it's not a,
not in this case because here they are at 12 and they are facing 2/2 power. So probably playing this as a 1/1 was also a fault. So I could have improved the clock a lot by having 3 power on the board. But here they are still waiting with the swords. So they don't want to spend the swords on these unimportant creatures, and they have so many turns available already. So here is a good thing because of drawing the fetch land. Here uh,
oh god, that's so
now I
good.
had now I had the perfect combination, so I had enough mana to cast the Crater Hoof,
Yeah.
and now I needed to hope that they don't find the Force of Will to counter this. But I think my situation here is still very good because I have 3 power on board, and I think they probably uh, had a bit too much fear about cards like Shepherd, that's why they decided to keep the Swords to Plowshares, and they should definitely kill the Dried Arbor end of the turn, but probably thought that they can just lose because of the Shepherd. And here,
I think you definitely go for it, right? Yeah.
I don't need to wait any longer. So here there are also again a couple of cards like Shark Typhoon, where it's not really good to attack there, and then they exile it with a trigger on the stack, but still get 12. So
Yeah.
nothing else than that, and then it's GG. So
We also
winning,
knew about the sword, so
yeah,
yeah.
winning the win and in.
Very good. I think this is the best game so far. In the challenge, it was very complex. A lot of small details, small decisions with little to no information, and the patience here. The patience mattered a lot,
Yeah,
and
the
notably,
patience.
you were not too far behind in time, just a few seconds. So that is really. I think that's the. When I am tanking for too long on this kind of games, I can really get behind in time. So I should this replay helps me a lot because if I can build in my head similar board states, then maybe I can remember this replay, for example, and play similarly. Like remember that I should be patient, or remember that the little detail in the previous game where you were thinking about going for Greece to diversify threats. So all of those details, I think,
Hmm.
they add a lot to the gameplay.
Yeah, and also the information. Sometimes just try to go for it. Okay, it was a bit obvious here that something is wrong because they put back the verdict, and usually they could have just 2-for-1s, but it's not really that unlikely that they waited for a third creature before they wanted to play that. But on the other hand, they saw that I played discard spells already, so they can assume that more discard spells come from the top of my deck. And yeah, okay, they had a very good reason to not um, tap out. But after we played the additional discard spell, we saw why, because they put back the spell pierce and got a force of will out of that. And then it makes sense that I keep the mana up instead of instead of verdict. But on the other hand, there were also a couple of cards which could be in his hand otherwise, like a Snapcaster Mage could also be an option. Why they don't go for the verdict at this point, because they can just eat my board with that, or Shark Typhon, as I mentioned. So yeah, very good that you get some innovation out of the matches, or and find some lines you could have played differently. And I really like it on myself also because after a couple of hours I have a completely different view on some things, like the mulligan decisions in the beginning or keeping the one-landers. But yeah, so far so good. It was very lucky, I would say. So
Yeah, let's
can't really
proceed.
complain. So now then it's the last round of the Swiss.